For many of you who have followed the Tiara Talk Show podcast since 2013, or have seen my tweets on Twitter, you may know that there's a particular animated Disney film that I love to talk about and love to learn more about. So, with the 20th anniversary of Atlantis, The Lost Empire, right around the corner, I really wanted to hear from the crew, the people who were responsible for the animated film that we all grew to love. And so many of my friends, with us in our 20s and 30s, we look back on this film and it's something that we remember so vividly. And to speak to some of the actual creative talent behind this film is just remarkable. So I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves to you.
Well, hi, this is Chris Jenkins, and I was the artistic coordinator on Atlantis.
And I'm Ed Ghertner. I was layout supervisor on Atlantis.
And I'm Kiran Joshi. I was the computer graphics imagery supervisor, also known as CGI.
And oh my goodness, this must have been a very hard film to put together, because the technicalities of it, just even watching it again, as I did the other night, in just observing the artistic meaning behind it and how much work was put into this. It must have taken forever. I don't know if it did, but do you guys remember that first meeting about learning that you're working on this project? What was that like?
Well, I think for all of us, we were on super earlier than on any other movie we'd worked on. So it was kind of wonderful. We grew with the movie and the vision, of it. And we were participating in visual development all the while in early pre-production, and it was a splendid, wonderful opportunity. Probably the best time on the movie, because it wasn't, we weren't slammed with deadlines. We just had to be creative. It was wonderful, and I hats off to Don Hahn and Gary and Kirk for allowing us to participate in that, because it really was a blast, and it gave me a taste for future things, the things that I'm doing now.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing, because we all got together and it was one of the first movies that I felt like everybody was on the same plane. And what had happened was, Chris and I know, and Kiran had worked, we were talking about doing it in widescreen because that's where everything was going. And we had talked to management about it, and they were like, oh God, we've got to buy new screens and new monitors and new this and that. And I was like, what are you talking about? The 16 inches is 16 inches wide. And so Chris and I put together a little show and tell to show management that it could be done that way for a number of reasons. It was, we wouldn't have to cut so much. So the animators had a chance to really actually animate the breaths and the anticipations. And it was also a chance for us to do more of a cinematic approach to one of the movies.
Yeah, and I think, Tiara, the fact that all of us had worked together, we had worked on Hunchback, really helped us, because we had really worked on that Hunchback of Notre Dame collectively. And so our chemistry was really great. We knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. And it was just amazing that the filmmakers really got us involved right from the beginning. And personally, I think most of us, we were all excited because we were trying to do something so different, an action movie, and we got to watch a lot of movies, action movies, and so a lot of research trips. I still remember the time that we went to Carlsbad Cave and crawled underneath those dark spaces, and just bring a lot of that information to the movie. And even though we were like heads of departments, we were allowed to participate in storytelling as Tav and all were developing the scripts and all. We would be involved in terms of like being able to listen to the pitch, contribute ideas, and just really a really great experience. And I think, like Chris said, like it really helped to make films from scratch. Like for example, for what I'm doing, developing our own projects and all, it was a really great lesson for us. And also like the challenges, like the technical challenges were amazing too, because they really wanted to push the envelope. They wanted to create a lot of CGI elements into it, and to be able to do it in such a way that it still looks 2D and hand-drawn and integrate all those aspects. So it was a lot of fun.
I'm actually remembering that trip now to the caves, and I think we only lost 3 crew members, right? If I'm correct, I think it was
something around those.
I can't remember their names. They weren't important anyway. We didn't need them.
Yeah, they weren't important. You know, I think we took them because we wanted to get rid of them. Actually,
Yeah. They were the
we
red
had
shirts.
Yeah,
We
it
had
looked like
2
you hit a lot of spiders. There's this documentary that I saw online. I shared it with you guys, but I will also post it in the show notes for our listeners to take a look at, because it's 2 hours long about it, all of the hard work that was put into this film. And it looks like you kind of ran into some spiders, and oh God, I was like, no!
We were taken out into the desert. We were all a bit concerned about that just to begin with. You know, what's going to happen here? Do they want a new crew? No, we were taken out into the desert, and there was a small manhole cover right in a sort of a dip in the desert, in the New Mexico desert. And the guy took the lid off, and we all went in one after the other. And then he said, "Now, if any of you don't look spiders, don't look up." Of course, everybody looks up immediately. And it was like a scene from an Indiana Jones movie. It was completely plastered with the most long-legged, ugly beasts I've ever seen in my life. And that only began the journey, because the guy had gone down into this sort of small room before the caves really began to check if there were any snakes. It was if you had any phobia whatsoever, it was going to change that day, particularly when we got locked in a narrow channel so tight that, and I'm a little guy, and Ed is not a little guy, and Gary and Dawn are not little guys, but I could not inhale a breath because the walls of the cave were so tight around my ribs. So yeah, it was a bonding experience.
Yeah. Talking about bonding, you know, we really got to travel a lot. You know, we went to Smithsonian Institute, like we went to, you know, Queen Mary, just understanding things about the museums, you know, things about submarines and ships and all those things. So you know, it was a lot of educational research, which really helped us in the film.
Grounds, right? Aberdeen Proving Grounds, I think, is where we went in Maryland. And the guy that took us around, the army guy, he was pretty high up there in the army. And the thing was, he was actually built like a piece of ordnance. He had a bald head that came to a point, and a round body that reminded me of the atomic bomb in Dr. Strangelove. It was brilliant, though, to be able to actually get inside some of those old machines and understand even to like how the rivets actually connected steel plates and so on. It was all informative to actually make a much better movie, and just a lot of fun.
It was.
You know, by that point we'd all been working with Disney for quite a long time, and it's good to be able to stretch yourself to actually think of, well, how can we achieve this? The other part of this, however, was that there was a certain nervousness that we perceived with, you know, the organization as it stood then, because we were making a big movie, and it was a very different movie. So that, you know, when you're doing anything original, that you've got nothing to stand on, in a sense. You've got to reassure people, and you've got to provide all sorts of charts and graphs and meet with people to say it's going to be okay. But probably the biggest memory for me working on this movie was something like being in a Western bar fight, because the studio really wanted to account for everything, and that was my job to do that. But my job was really, as an artist, to provide the best possible movie for the directors. So I was slap bang in the middle, trying to make everybody feel okay, but try as hard as I can to get the director's vision up on that screen. I think it was like that for all of us, really, though. I mean, it was my direct job to do the forms and everything, but we all, you know, Ed and Kiran and I were doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember like when we were talking about what movie we were making, and before Atlantis, the Dawn and Kirk, they were talking about trying to do something like John Carter of Mars, like the stuff. And for some reason, I think it's because we didn't have the rights to do that. So then they said the next best thing is to make our own action adventure. And then when they pitched the idea of doing Atlantis, I was just blown away. I just thought like, wow, this would be really cool. And obviously, we were all thinking like, this movie is going to have a lot of challenges. It's an unknown territory, not only from technically like the C-scope thing, and also like just in terms of like, we just knew there's just going to be, because it's an action movie, there'll be lots of, vehicles, creatures, and all those things. And how do we like really make a compelling story that can, that you can integrate all these things and be able to engage the audience? I think that was like the biggest challenge. And so, and Kirk and Gary, their vision was so big. We would like, the brain trust would normally like meet before we even, sit down with them, and we would do our homework, and we would plan in terms of like pitching a different, trying to execute their vision with creative solutions, technical solutions, and saying like giving them options. Like, you can still communicate this story, but if we do it in this fashion, it might be a little bit much more doable. And so we spent a lot of time in that. I think the Brain Trust did a lot of work in terms of like, being able to execute their vision.
There was a lot of artwork that we all did that hasn't been seen. There was a ton of artwork that was cut out, and then we put some of it back in, but the experimentation of what the show would look like and what Atlantis would be was exciting to all of us. And I think we accomplished it, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more of Atlantis. But the artwork is still floating around somewhere. It's probably in the ARL.
Yeah, and the other thing I still remember is like we brought in some really amazing visual development artists. I know like Richard, Ricardo, people that worked on Star Wars and all those like, not the traditional animated visual development artists only, but we brought in from people who were like had done a lot of experience in live action visual development people. And then so we're actually not only doing designs, but we're building like sculptures and maquettes. I know we had this big, huge submarine that was built as a reference so that, and it just, I think it's a movie that was not just done as art, but also done in terms of like experience, being able to hold the objects and, see how the subparts would look like physically and all those things. I think that was a great experience.
You really had an amazing crew behind this entire film, and everybody seemed so excited and really ready to jump in and create something that was definitely unique and never had been seen before. So let's talk about your individual roles, because I don't think a lot of people know the breakdown of what each of you do. So why don't you start, Chris, and tell us a little bit about what your role is and how you kind of go ahead and work it.
Well, so the artistic coordinator position came about, I think I'm right in saying, on Rescuers Down Under, and from there through Beauty and the Beast and all the rest of the movies, it became an essential job. When it's really what it was, as and like a lot of artistic coordinators, I came out of being an effects supervisor, and it was sort of a junction point in a sense that all of the artwork, including all of the digital stuff, was fed into a place where you had to sort of manipulate a jigsaw puzzle to make everything make sense. And that was sort of where I was at. There was a lot more people behind the scenes actually with their hands on the physical pieces, but I had to make sense of it and then feed it into the back end departments where all the different processes hopefully came together in the most streamlined way. It was and as you say, with Atlantis being so different, the challenges were much, much greater. Not only were we doing a CinemaScope movie, which wasn't as hard as it initially seemed it was going to be, but it was an extra factor. There were so many wonderful CG elements that Kiran was creating that had to work with traditional 2D animation. And it's not as simple as it sounds. I mean, you'd think, okay, well, you just put them together and on it goes. But no, you have to make the CG elements look a little bit more 2D to begin with, and Kiran can definitely speak more to that than I can. But the way in which an animated character looks part of the same world, which in CG it's so perfect and beautiful, right? So this was a big aim with Atlantis. We had done bits and pieces of CG all the way back, but this was a broad vision of, it's an action adventure movie. Let's really throw a lot of this technology onto the screen and make it work. So it's really, like I say, the best analogy is like a jigsaw puzzle. You've got to bring all those pieces together and hope that when you get to the last piece, it fits. And if it doesn't, the other part of my job was to have a big sledgehammer and bang it until it fitted. So, but again, I wasn't on my own. I mean, Kiran and Ed and I, and Marlon and I particularly, we all worked together very much as a team to make that happen. It was just, I had to be certain that it was going on before it went into the back end of the production.
It was also, to Chris's greatness, I'll say that, that it was a picture that had multiple characters that were on screen all the time. And usually there was always like one or two characters, but we had, and I mean characters also involved machinery that CG was doing. So you had probably 5 or 6 characters on the screen at all times. And that's really tough to get through the system.
Yeah, and as Chris and Ed was saying, my job was I had a team of CG artists, which consists of both the artists, animators, as well as technical, directors. So our job was to really integrate anything that we produce in computer graphics into various departments. And so the challenges for us was like how to make it like it's hand drawn, whether it's effects vehicle elements or whether it's a character or it's a background, like if you're creating three-dimensional camera moves, then, how do you make that so that when it's rendered, it looks like more like a painterly, artwork. Same as there were very, very tough shots that we all worked together, which was like, there were shots like where you have a submarine and then initially when you close up on the submarine, you'd see Milo hand drawn. And as the camera pulls out and the submarine goes down, we had to then switch it into a CG Milo or CG character because it was just impossible to draw that tiny little character there. But then we still have all these people on the submarine deck moving out. So those are things that we had to really plan it well and then execute it such that for the audience, they from a story point of view, they can tell which ones are done traditionally versus which ones are done CG. And like Chris and Ed were saying, like one of our biggest challenges was anything that we build in the computers, how do we make it look like it's actually hand drawn? So we would then, we had to create these tools, software to like make it like, what we call hidden lines, which is like trying to create ink lines. And if you notice, like when in traditional hand drawings, the lines can vary in terms of width, and then you can actually also have different colors depending on the styles of the characters. So we need to be able to solve that so that the lines are like makes it look like it's hand drawn, even though they're actually generated by the computer. So those are like some of the amazing challenges that we had to. But then obviously it was a lot of fun. I still remember there was a point where like we were coming to the end of the film, and the prologue was something that the directors wanted to do something differently, and so Chris came to us and said like this is going to be an action scene but we want to do it very stylized, what kind of different than the film, but a completely different stylized illustrative look. And so Chris brought in another artist, Rob, who's who we all knew was a great artist, but initially, like, the directors were like, well, we don't know if he'll be the right person. And so I have to give Chris a kudos, because behind the scene, he had Rob started working on some like designs and stuff like that, and then put together a package and then took it to the director and say, this is what the film can look like, your prologue can look like. And then that's when the director's vision, they all, Kirk and Gary, looked at and said, yeah, this should be something really cool. And once they said that'll be something cool, now we got to go and figure, like, how do we do this, because we have to build all those things in the computer and then, have that motion. But the look was very different. But now, like, even when I watch the movie, for me, one of the best things is the prologue. Like, when I look at it, it's like very different style,
I think we were all so passionate that to get this done, and we knew Gary and Kirk so well, and we want them to have the best possible movie, obviously, and as did we. But it was that passion that led us to, like, let's go looking for techniques. Let's make this happen. Let's do this. And that actually opens up another part of how difficult Atlantis was, because, as I indicated before, at that time, I think it was probably because some of the movies prior to Atlantis hadn't done as well as the studio had hoped. So there was more of a sense of accounting for everything that was over us all the time. So we were trying to be free and create and make wonderful things. And at the same time, you had to figure out, well, we've only got X amount of budget to achieve this. So as we all look at this, and Kiran had indicated that the Brain Trust did a lot of work in this regard, and we did an awful lot of work. We would get together and say, all right, we can have 3 of those, whatever that element might be, or we can have one of these, that more complicated element. What's going to make the movie better? Which one do we choose? And all the way through then, we were trying to find the most applicable technique, the most beautiful images, essentially, to make the best possible movie within the limitations that the studio had at the time. And that was very, very tough. Very tough, actually. I think it was very stressful. And and yet, again, that was the benefit of having worked together with the directors and Don for such a long time. And Don and I go back all the way to Roger Rabbit, which seems like in the dark ages now. But when you know people so well, you have that trust and that shorthand of conversation that everybody knows. You're not trying to hold the directors back. You're actually, quite conversely, trying to give them as much as you possibly can without it turning into a battle for resources with upper management. So that was actually my memory of the movie, as much as the early days and the wonderful visual development we were able to do, and the trips we had, and not to leave out Kiran's bunny costume, which I'll talk about in a minute. It was a movie that had enough passion to match the challenge of what we were being given.
In my situation as layout supervisor, as a designer in pre-production and working with the directors and the storyboard guys and all the other leads, basically the Brain Trust, I would get in and start designing. So, what does Atlantis look like? What does the Whitmore's house look like? What does the submarine look like? So we would touch on a little bit of everything, but then it would split off where the submarine would go to Kiran, and we brought in so many people like Alex Nino and I'm trying to remember everybody. Ricardo Delgado,
and Mike Mignola,
Mike Mignola,
who is a very famous Hellbook comic series. So the style from the initially was like, let's try to do like a comic book style with Mike Mignola influence,
Yeah, and so I like the way Don and Kirk and Gary work, because we all work together. by me being in development and doing some of the drawings, once we got into production, I knew what the areas of the locales look like, at least for the most part. And then my crew would come on, and it was easier for me to hand out the artwork knowing the crew and what they could handle. Layout was an interesting department because we would do pre-production, into production, and then I would handle some of the stuff afterwards. But we would have to create we were always creating the camera, the look, and working with the art director, Dave Getz, and background, Lisa Keene, trying to get the artwork out of it. And once we were in production, it was kind of like playing in the sandbox and then graduating within the next year and getting in and doing the final artwork. We were lucky on this show in the sense that on Beauty and the Beast, we did that movie in almost 1 year. Total production was probably a year and a half, 2 years, but layout took almost exactly 1 year to do, which is unheard of in that studio. But on this show, I was on Atlantis for 6 years, and that was quite a long time.
Right after Hunchback. It was interesting because after Hunchback, what happened was, this is a little juicy stuff. Jeffrey Katzenberg had left Disney and had gone started DreamWorks. So right when we were finishing Hunchback, Jeffrey was trying to recruit all of us to go work at DreamWorks, and they were calling us all the time. And so for Peter Snyder, who was our president, so he wanted to make sure that the team were intact. So right from the beginning, so they approached us and said, we want you guys to be all together in the same group, and you guys will get to do a great movie, whatever Kirk and Gary is wanting to do. So Don, Kirk, Gary, they would come to us and talk to us and say, look, guys, we're gonna put together a team right after Hunchback. You're gonna get a little break, and we're gonna go into a development for an amazing film. So we were enticed.
Yeah, but you're on it.
Yeah. So here we had Jeffrey trying to lure us into his Prince of Egypt, trying to I think at that time Jeffrey had started at Amblin with Steven Spielberg. He hadn't built his building it. He was trying to lobby us to go there, and then in the side, Disney was trying to have us stay there. And I think it was one of the best times because the demand was so high for great artists. And just what Chris was saying, one of the interesting things that just came back is you work all day and you're busy, and then you go home late at night, and then one morning I come to work around 8 o'clock, and I see a bunch of carrots on my desk, and so they made me wear a bunny suit and walk around eating carrots all day long, all over the department. Things that people would have to do to keep people entertained,
Well, what was the bunny suit for? Was it celebrating Easter, or was just something random?
It was my birthday, and instead of coming and bring me birthday cake and singing stuff, they made fun out of me by making me wear a bunny suit, and and they put tons of carrots on my desk, and all day, wherever I was supposed to go, I was supposed to, nibble on the carrots and walk around. I made a fool out of myself, and it's funny because now, people find those, people post those pictures on Facebook, and I'm like, my God, this thing will never go away.
I need to see a picture of this.
You didn't have to wear it for 3 weeks, though. I thought that was a little excessive. But...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What was it like to work on these specific characters in particular with the film in general? Because this is, not usually a group of people you would see together. It's kind of like an outcast group. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it goes back to, how different everything was about this movie. There's a certain musicality, obviously, and a wonderful musicality to the different voices that we were working with, and it was always fun to see the rushes or the dailies, just because you didn't know what you were going to get. We weren't at the sessions with Gary and Kirk, so we'd hear them in Sweatbox for the first time, and yeah, the performances were great, and just made you feel like there's something special here. If we can only make sure we have enough time and enough resources to get this done, we've got a great movie on our hands.
Part of my duties was to direct the live action reference, and we did that over at WDI on a soundstage. And part of that came out of some of the acting that we got out of the performers who came in to do the acting. Gary always would come in, and he was obviously the director, but I would shoot the video, and some of the stuff came out of just having the people do their acting. It was one of the first pictures, other than I would say Pocahontas, where we were doing realistic human characters, or had to at least appear to be realistic. And so that was another challenge too for all the animators.
So when the film is released, what were your reactions to that? Were you guys at the blue carpet ceremony that they had at the El Capitan Theater to see how people were, reacting to the film?
Yeah, it was pretty spectacular. It was a great night. They all are when you do that kind of thing, but this was very different. And I remember we had they gave us gifts of glowing crystals. I wish I still had. Now I think one of my kids took it and it's no longer. But yeah, it was a great event, and we all walked along Hollywood Boulevard. I seem to remember to get there. Very nice event.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I was just saying, I really wish Kiran had his bunny outfit with him at that point. To put on and give Peter.
Yeah, I mean, Tiara, you brought a really great point, because people think of Disney as a princess area, when they look at movies, oh, it's got to be a princess story, and I think some of the films that we worked on, like Hunchback and Atlantis, and even we didn't work on Treasure Planet. I think those were things that Disney was trying to do something different, and unfortunately, the audience, they were so much into wanting to watch again another Little Mermaid, or Beauty and the Beast, more like princess love stories and all, and trying to deviate from that. I didn't think it didn't come out as good as what we would expect, but for people that worked on it, I think it gave us a really great experience. And I can say that, for me, my what I'm doing now, after Disney, I went and started my own studio, and believe it or not, I'm working with Kirk Wise on it now. So after 20 years, Kirk, I'm making Kirk's movie. He's directing, and I'm making that. And what's fascinating is all the experiences that we learned on those things are really helping us in our career, and it really broadens our mind and our experiences.
One other thing I'd like to bring up too is the fact that we had the idea in our heads. We knew what we wanted to make, and we were making an action-adventure movie. Action-adventure movies are longer than normal movies. And we were trying to explain to management, as far as cost and budget, that you have scenes of just vistas. And when we first started, I know Chris and I, and I know Kiran was there too, trying to explain to them that it's going to be a little bit longer. We need those shots. And they said, no, we got to have it in that same box. We have this to do it. And we had a lot of beautiful artwork. And so it kept getting cut back. And towards the end of the movie, when we were working on it, we ran it one of the last times for management, and they were like, we're missing those big shots. We all kind of hit ourselves in the head and said, yeah, you're right. So we went back and pulled a lot of our artwork and put it back into the picture. To me, that meant that they understood that's what it needed. And I was appreciative of management seeing it and understanding that.
It was exceptional in that if you look how long ago it was, and all of the CGI it's beautiful in the movie. It was a pretty elementary kind of CGI compared to today. And then, of course, that's probably one of the reasons then when you look at Atlantis as being one of the last 2D movies in a general sense, as it wasn't long after that Toy Story came out and the game changed.
Yep.
So it was an adventurous movie in its look, and it was adventurous to do because we were breaking a lot of rules to get it done, to be that way, to look like an animated comic.
Well, since it's now 20 years, I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's been 20 years almost. I really do appreciate you being able to take the time to answer some questions. It's just so fascinating to hear the history behind this film, and it's so appreciated. So I know there are going to be a couple of fans, maybe more than a couple. I think there's going to be plenty of fans who are going to be listening out to this interview. But right. Is there anything you guys would like to say specifically to them?
My son is a fan. I took him to the premiere with me, and knowing how much he loves it, how much it continues to have inspired him, and I think Atlantis did inspire a lot of movies kind of like that. If you think the way in which we painted this other world, it's not unlike a certain James Cameron movie that came out a few years later, but we were there first. And I think that whatever the fans can take from this to inspire their own path in artistry or writing or anything else, man, it would be wonderful to know more about that, how it's influenced lives and how much it just stays with them as a childhood memory.
Yeah, I'm still working at Disney, and I have a friend who's in consumer products, and I hear from her all the time that people want more Atlantis. There's a whole fan base out there that is really excited about it, which is great. And I'm also kind of proud sometimes when I hear people complaining about it, to be honest, like, oh, it didn't get here, it didn't give me this, didn't give me that, because people want more. It's not that they're complaining that it was bad. It's just like, oh God, I wanted to see more Atlantis, or I wanted to see more of this. So we struck a nerve somewhere, and it's really great to hear.
I was going to say that for those audience that is going to listen to this podcast and bring back memories of Atlantis and all, I hope they also take the same lesson that I got out of the movie, which is like, you got to take risks, and at the end of the day, you have to enjoy and love what you do, and you leave the rest to whatever comes. If you love what you do, and if you you've done the best you can, you hope for the best, and whatever happens, happens.
I'd like to echo that. I mean, I think what we've talked about, and I haven't seen these guys in front of me here for quite a few years, but we still have that friendship from that time. And I think that friendship, that camaraderie, that certain silliness and wearing bunny costumes and so forth, if you enjoy the movie you're on, and I've certainly found this since, it will come out in some way. It will move the audience, and I'm very proud of that.
And I hope that there really is a true, in-person reunion for you guys, because it just seemed this was such a unique experience, and to hear these stories, and I know that there are plenty more, probably more stories about the shenanigans you guys were doing, but I do hope that we get something within the next year or so, but you know what I mean? I'm just so glad that we could speak today. So thank you, all three of you, for being on the show. This was a lot of fun and wonderful way to pay tribute to a wonderful project that each of you played such an important role on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for including on your talk show, and brought back a lot of great memories.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
I'll be sending you some carrots before the end. Before the end of the week.
See, there it carries on.
Yeah, at the Joshi house, instead of celebrating Easter, we celebrate on my birthday, which is coming soon. You can start selling carrots.
Hey, Milo, you got something sporty, like a tuna?